All right. Well, it is 3:30, and in all fairness, we should probably start on time. Welcome, everyone. You're getting on toward the end of day two. Goodness gracious. This is Building Community with Resident Artists. We're very happy to have Caitlin Coyne, Jeanette Pomeroy Parsi, and Jeffrey Davis with us today to share their experience and their programming with us. Um, I'm Sarah. Hi. Just to helping out with some of the housekeeping around today. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and ask questions along the way. Before I hand it off, just a couple reminders. If you remember to keep yourself on mute during the presentation, but when we get to the Q&A at the end, certainly turn your mic on, turn your video on, join the conversation, whatever you want to do. If you want to rename yourself in the participant bar or in the chat, you can hover over yourself and three little dots will appear, and you click on those dots and it'll give you a chance to rename. We also have closed captioning turned on for this session. So if you look at the bottom of your screen at the ribbon, there's something that says live transcript with a little CC. Click on that and you can get the live captioning. Feel free to share reactions and comments and chats along the way. But I think that's probably all I need to do in terms of housekeeping. And I should hand it over to our wonderful speakers. So enjoy the session, everyone, and thanks for coming.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jeff and Jeanette and I are really excited to be here to talk about the Maker in Residence program at the Ignite Studio. We're located at the Hamilton East Public Library. Hamilton East Public Library has two locations, one in Fishers, Indiana, and one in Noblesville, just north of Indianapolis. And the Ignite Studio is located at our Fishers location. It's a 15,000 square foot art-focused maker space open to the public every day. We offer tons of programming and equipment and tools and supplies, and you don't have to have a library card to come use our space. And one exciting facet of our space is that we have this resident program. So we invite an artist or a maker twice a year. We invite two different artists to join us as residents in our space for 3 to 4 months at a time. And they join us and they offer programming and they get a stipend, and they build community with us, with our patrons around their art making process. So Jeff and Jeanette and I are going to talk to you about that. But first, before we jump into the nuts and bolts of what that program is and how it's developed over the past 3 years, my name is Caitlin Coyne. I'm the Director of Experiential Learning at Hamilton East Public Library. We have speaking today two past residents. Jeff Davis was our very first Maker in Residence, so he really helped us pioneer and chart this program at its founding. We didn't know a lot about how this program was going to work prior to Jeff joining us in the first summer that we were open. He's an artist and the founder of the workshops of GB Davis. He does a lot of really cool woodworking and printmaking work in his studio in Noblesville. And he did a lot of cool woodworking work in the Ignite Studio when he was with us. And we have another former resident with us today, Jeanette Pomeroy Parsi, who's the artist and founder of JP Parsi Inc. She's a very talented oil painter and an arts educator at her core with tons of experience. Both Jeff and Jeanette are, former real life teachers in schools, and then they came to us. And so we're excited to talk today about what we've all learned as artists and as arts administrators in this program. But first, we wanted to give you just a little overview of what the Ignite Studio is, because I'm assuming many of you have never visited us, which I hope that after this presentation, you come and find time to meet with us and experience our studio space. So I just want to share this short video. Oops. Hold on just 1 second. My bad. There we go. Just to give a brief overview of what the Ignite Studio is and the kinds of things that you can do there every day. discovered our space and offered to make that video for free for us. We were very lucky that they were just excited about us and made that beautiful video for us. Okay, so before we jump into the meat of the program, we wanted to do a little icebreaker with everybody. And this is just a little bit of an example of the kinds of stuff that we've done with our makers in residence in order to build some community. So we wanted to start by hoping to build a little bit of community amongst our group today. I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette to do a little icebreaker.
Okay. Like Caitlin just said, this is a chance to build community within our little group here. We're going to do a blind contour line drawing. And for those of you who haven't done it, I'm going to explain it and walk you through it. The first thing I need you to do is turn on your camera for anybody who might choose to draw you. What you're going to do is pick somebody's face in the video window, and you are going to get a piece of paper out in front of you and a pen or a pencil. Now, with a blind contour line drawing, you cannot pick up your pencil or else you'll lose your spot. When I say blind contour line, what I want you to do is look at the person in the screen, put your pen or pencil at a starting point on your paper, and for 30 seconds, you are going to draw the person that you see in the screen without looking at your paper. And it's going to be one continuous line. As I said, if you pick the pen or pencil up, you will lose your way very easily. If you happen to be able to see the paper in your line of sight, what I suggest you do is put your hand up under your nose and position it so that you can't see your paper. You're only looking straight forward at the person that you're drawing. So don't lift your pencil, don't look at your paper. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. If you're done before 30 seconds, just lift your pencil up. And then what we're going to do at the end is we're going to all show our drawings. Okay? So here we go. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, stop.
Oh no.
Oh no, it's Picasso at the best. So here's, if you can, everybody go ahead and turn their computer, if you don't have your screen on. Let's see. Great. Oh my gosh. This is actually one of my favorite activities to do, especially at the beginning of any kind of class or presentation, because it's an immediate icebreaker and it makes everybody laugh about themselves and about each other. So I give this to you as a great exercise to take forth in your own experiences. So, Caitlin, back to you.
I think one of the I think one of the things that I really take away from that experience every time I play that game with Jeanette is that there's an element of play in the work that we do to build community in our space. So I wanted to just share a short overview of the other past makers that aren't with us today and that have helped us inform this presentation. We've had a whole range of mediums. We've had stone carvers and costume designers, acrylic painters, oil painters, paper crafters, and Jeff as the wood carver. And we have, for the very first time right now, our first non-visual artist as our maker in residence. Eric Salazar is a musician who's recording a community album right now with our residency space. So this is just an overview of the past makers that we have had. And today we really wanted to talk about how we built this program and what are the things that we've learned along the way in order to build this program. So one fundamental thing that we wanted to address right off the bat was, what are the nuts and bolts of having a residency program in a space like Ignites or like a community organization that's open to the public? And for us, what we found is that it's really important to have the sort of tangible things, and this is one thing that really attracts a lot of people to our program, is that our artists have a dedicated space that they work in, and it belongs to them during the term of their residency. So they're the key holder to that space, and it's only open to the public when they choose to open it to the public, so that they have that as the space to run programs from, but also the space to complete their personal work in. And we really ask that the artists that work with us, as much as possible, make that studio space their studio space, which I know can be a big lift for artists, especially when they have their own studio offsite somewhere else. We're also able to offer a stipend to our resident artists. We work with the Friends of the Library, which is a grant-making organization specific to the Hamilton East Public Library, and they funded the stipend through a grant funding process for the past 3 years and continue to fund the stipend for this. So that helps us attract artists because that's money that we give to them to come and play with us. And that stipend is specifically for the artist's time. We're also able to make sure that they're not spending their own dollars on supplies that the public are consuming. So we also have a budget for supplies that we offer for any programming that they're doing with our patrons. And then also the access to the equipment in our space is another kind of fundamental. We have all types of different equipment, and we really encourage our artists to make use of it as much as possible. Another sort of fundamental thing for the arts administration side in creating this program was to articulate the goals of our program prior to setting out a call to artists. And Jeff was really instrumental with this with me in that we were a new space, and in working with him as an artist for our first residency program, we had this residency space, and we knew that we wanted to have a resident program, but we needed to kind of determine what our goals for the program were. And ultimately, we decided that the primary goal is to expose our patrons to different art making practice, to diverse mediums, and also to create community around a single artist art making practice, and for them to be able to embed in a community in a way that develops their art, develops them as a teaching artist, and exposes other people to the work that they're doing, in the hopes that that kind of community that is created around the artist making practice follows them outside of the residency, and that they create these kind of connections and network of benefactors or patrons that are going to follow their work going forward, now that there are people in the community aware of what they're doing. After we sort of articulated our goals, we set out to write the application and make those goals clear to the artists that we are calling out. And right now our application's open, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat later on. And you can read some of what we've kind of articulated, but we talk really clearly about what our goals are, including that this is a teaching residency. And I just sat in a fantastic presentation about the PACE program and got to hear from 2 amazing teaching artists who were participating in that. And I agree wholeheartedly with some of the things that they said about being an artist and being a teacher are not necessarily always synonymous. And so making that really clear in our application was something that we've tried to do. Lastly, we asked ourselves the question, to jury or not to jury? This is a community-based program, and we felt that we jury our application process because it helps to give the administrators in our program some distance, because we're working with artists on a daily basis, but it also professionalizes the agreement on some level, and it helps us develop a mutually beneficial agreement with the artists that we're working with. So those are sort of the steps that, as an arts administrator in building this program, that we thought through in Ignite to think about how to create this program. But for artists and lastly, whether or not you want to bring in artists interview once you've sort of narrowed the field, which we've started to do as well because we've gotten so many fantastic applications. For artists, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette and Jeff to talk about the kind of work that they did in determining whether or not they wanted to participate in this residency, whether they felt it was a good fit for them. So Jeanette?
When I saw the application for this, I immediately wanted to, I was new to the area and I wanted to evaluate the organization's goals and their audience. And would this be a good place for me to put myself to get to know the community a little better? So that was really important. And just as far as the residency application and the space itself, I visited the space as well as part of the evaluation process. And the space was just fantastic. So I mean, that was a box check right away. And so I decided that, yes, the goals of what I wanted to do and bring to the community, as well as the space and meeting and talking to Caitlin and some of the people that work down there, really, I felt it was a good fit for what I wanted to try to do to help in the community.
So I've been established in the community for some time, but I'd left public education and opened a studio right at the time this happened. And this was an amazing opportunity for me to make my studio known. It's hard to get the word out that you're doing things. And by me able to take this residency, I was able to immerse myself in one part of our community completely and immediately. It was a really great program. The one thing I thought was really important is I think modeling is as important in teaching as direct instruction is. So I wanted to make sure that this was an opportunity where I could spend my entire day and kind of put my work cycle out there for the world to see in the library. So I did that. I moved my studio and every aspect from the computer work, website work, creating, designing, merchandising, all that was done in this space, in a giant fishbowl.
It's kind of like a fishbowl, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we talk about painting a whole picture of yourself, one of the things that Jeff and Jeanette did really well in working with me and determining how they were going to, use the residency and what they were going to do was they thought about themselves holistically in their application and really did a good job of laying out who they were and being really self-aware about what their goals were as an artist and how they felt that their goals aligned with our organization's goals. And the goals on their clarity there. So we're here obviously to talk about building community with resident artists. And one thing in particular with this residency is that, we really all agreed before we got together for this, that teaching was a fundamental aspect of how to build residencies, community and residencies in a space like a public library, which is where we're located. That interest in teaching is paramount for an artist to want to engage in that way. And I heard in other sessions about other fantastic ways that artists can engage a community that isn't necessarily a teaching model. And so I think it works, in both ways. But when you're looking at a residency to determine whether or not that's sort of an aspect that the organization is looking for, and whether or not that's something in yourself that you're interested in pursuing as a skill. And I think that Jeanette and Jeff both have this background as teachers that they were able to bring to this, but we've also had artists in the past. I know I can say, K-Bay and Box the artists both came to us without any teaching experience, but it was something that they were interested in developing. And we saw Ignite saw it as an opportunity to work with an artist and help them sort of articulate those goals for themselves and find a way to bloom. So if you don't have a teaching background, don't feel like you can't apply to something like this. It really is an interest in developing that is, I think, important and is really the most foundational thing. Also, I think, building good communication is really important as well. Jeanette and Jeff, do you want to talk about what that was like for you and as building communication with this organization that you were at the beginning of your residency?
So Jeanette, go ahead.
Oh, well, I found it very easy to communicate with the library and with Caitlin in particular. And it was really, really critical to me to make sure all the expectations and the scheduling were agreed upon by, both of us. And I found myself in the space much, much more than the contractual commitment was. I mean, I spent probably almost every day down there in some fashion. And I think, Jeff, you probably did too.
I moved in. I spent all day there from opening.
So, and through the communication, I think it was relatively easy then to convey the programming and the excitement and the energy to the people that were going to be viewing, participating, asking questions, interacting with us. So
Part of that good communication is having an open door. There were times I was required to have the door open and times I was teaching, but I kept, unless I felt like people coming in were going to really bother me, the door was open. And I think it's important to have people wander in those informal moments and to initiate conversations and talk about upcoming programming and opportunities.
Yeah, and I think Jeff and Jeanette kind of hit on this idea that there is a little bit of there's sort of different tiers of the communication that you build when you're undertaking a residency like this. There's the communication you have with the organization, sort of figuring out the scheduling and communicating what you need, what your needs are in terms of supplies, and making sure that the staff are there to support you, and making that all very clear. But then there's also a level of communication that you build with your audience. And I think that kind of speaks to our next point of how to create buy-in with an audience. And I think Jeff and Jeanette did a really great job of that in this residency, because they were so clear in communicating about who they were and why the people walking into the space should be interested in what they were doing. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm just was going to go to the next point if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
So creating buy-in with the audience, as again, having that open door and engaging people in every aspect of a project, so they understand everything from planning to merchandising. I brought my body of work and had it available for people to come in and handle and look at. And I think more important than any of that, and this is true in any education setting, is that you make sure people feel safe. If they feel like they're in a situation, I don't want to say where they can't fail, because I encourage failure and I want to talk about that. But if you can put them in a situation where they're going to fail safely, we're going to fail with support, they're going to be much more involved. And I know that an arts program or anything with equipment and fine skills is intimidating to the public. So if you can reduce all those barriers, or at least put them in a safe place and know they had support, that's really important in getting that kind of buy-in.
well, and that segues very, very clearly to the atmosphere of trust and risk-taking. The safer the people felt when they walked into the space, the more excited and enthusiastic they were about participating. And I saw during my residency time, I saw an increase in participation in the programming as the months went by. And that was a matter of people, feeling comfortable and coming back again. So.
And I also think it's important to communicate through the entire time that the opportunity doesn't end the day that you leave your residency. We're there to develop long-term relationships, so you can talk to them about what could happen when you move out of that space into your own studio or other teaching situations. So they know that buy-in isn't just for a month or 2 or 3. It can be a lifetime or at least long-term.
I think that's very much a facet of an outshoot of one of our primary goals with this particular residency that we were able to articulate beforehand, calling back to that to allow an artist that opportunity to build those long-term relationships in the community and hopefully build trust and support that will continue to support their art making beyond the months or the scale of the residency. I also just want to touch on one last idea for this atmosphere of trust and risk taking that, from the arts administrative point of view, It can be difficult sometimes to hand over authority and really put someone else in the driver's seat when you know your audience, you know your patrons really well. But I think one thing that we try and do is give the artists that are participating with this as residents as much information as we can about who the patrons are and what the experiences are that we've had before, but then to hand over that authority and really trust and in the artist to build their unique experience for your patrons and go along with them when they suggest for you to take a risk, which can be kind of scary sometimes, especially in a library setting. But there have been times where those risks have really paid off for us. So, and it's because they're bringing in their creativity. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And that is just to talk a little bit about the feedback loops that we can create between artist and arts admin when you're working in this sort of ongoing relationship long term with somebody. What's the structure for giving and getting feedback that's in place already for those artists? And it can be really structured, it can be really formal, like evaluations, but it also can be more loose as well, where the artist has an open door and then you have one in return, and creating an atmosphere where when something isn't working, there's a trust level that allows them to bring that to you and know that you're going to act on it. Jeanette, did you want to talk a little bit about feedback loops?
Well, I know one of the things that we developed toward the end of, or at the end of my residency was the ability for the participants to actually give feedback, at the end of the program. I love feedback from the people who take classes from me, and of course the people who interact with me. That's easy. But as the patrons in the library, I really cherished the feedback from them in almost a more formal way, and I think we were able to figure that out as the program grew. But from the standpoint of the feedback from the arts administration point of view, I think we had a really, really nice wrap up at the end of the residency to be able to have an open discussion, feedback from the administrative point of view to me and from me back to Ignite. So.
The feedback Jeanette gave to us was that she wanted post-program surveys that we didn't have in place during her residency. And we do now have that in place for residents because of the feedback that she gave us. So it's really important to make sure that each artist feels like when they're bringing that information to you about something that they felt like wasn't working, that they're making it better for the person that's going to put after them, and that you really want to be able to do that, because I'm not the person in the residency. I don't know how it's going unless they tell me, and unless I'm open to hearing that, which is really important.
And that goes back.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Goes back into the buy-in too, because when the audience knows that they have some say and some control over programming, that's more buy-in.
Yeah.
They see that quick response.
Yeah, and because of that, we're getting more. We were collecting kind of quantitative information about attendance numbers and that sort of thing, but now we're able to get more qualitative information about learning objectives and if we are actually meeting the goals of our residency to build community among our patrons and our resident artists. So Jeanette.
Oh, we're frozen.
Yep.
Caitlin, you're frozen.
Well, this is my slide, so
I was going to say, go ahead, Jeff.
She's coming to life. This is just a kind of an overview of my time at the in my residency, and I don't see that, so we'll be back. There it is. So I was able to work with some of the students that I had in my space, and they came and worked and at Ignite and became involved with the library program, which I think was a thing we haven't talked about, but we bring people to the program too that may not have seen it or been there before. I developed classes in lots of different disciplines. My work is very interdisciplinary. So I was able to focus on lots of different areas, and we could respond to what people were interested in learning and develop programming around that. I did pick up an apprentice, became very close to one of the apprentice students. He was is a high school student. And he worked with me after I left and was an apprentice, worked with me several times a week here in my studio. And then he moved to Colorado. And then I didn't see him during most of COVID. And then he came back and spent the summer with me. So that's a permanent relationship that came out of this. And he's a fantastic young man. I did move everything in my studio. I was doing mostly woodworking, leatherworking. So I set up an entire wood shop in this space, which was so people could see that into all the different aspects of what I do. And we also, it's not listed here, but there's some photos. We had a cumulative event where on the day after Thanksgiving, rather than having, we could give people an alternative to going out and going Christmas shopping. So we built toboggans in the studio, and we involved over 100 patrons in building 2 toboggans during that I guess that was just a one-day program. I also worked on my shows and did a lot of merchandising and developed a booth in that space.
Talk about risk-taking and trust. When Jeff told me that they were going to build a toboggan and bend wood somehow, I had no clue how he was going to do it, but it ended up being a really wonderful project. And just to touch a little bit more on Miles, the apprentice that came out of this, that was a really wonderful sort of relationship to see bloom in the studio space, and to see that kind of connection being made with a young man who got real life work skills because of the connections that he made with Jeff, and Jeff got a little bit of labor out of it too.
Gosh, community beyond the residency. For me, as I said, this residency was awarded to me just after about 6 months having moved to Fishers. And it was a fabulous experience to introduce myself to the community. I was able to create a body of work in the residency because I, like Jeff, moved my whole studio down to Ignite, and spent time working to create, I think I created about 45 paintings in the 3-month period, which for me was a very, very prolific body of work to create. I was able to introduce myself to everything from, kindergartners and preschoolers all the way up to senior citizens in the community. And some of those people followed me as I became the resident instructor at Nickel Plate Arts for painting and drawing. And I continue there, and we developed an entire online presence for teaching during the pandemic. So we were able to maintain programming at Nickel Plate, and was named the 2020 Arts Educator of the Year last year. And I've also continued to have a relationship with Ignite and Caitlin as we've moved forward doing programming. And I'm so excited to launch our next program November 1st. So it's been a great experience for me. I can't speak highly enough.
That's been one of the coolest things about all of the residents that have come through our space is to see that once the residency ends, the relationship continues. Each of our residents has come back, has kind of boomeranged back to us after the residency to work with us in some fashion, whether it's doing another, workshop with our patrons, or whether it's getting contracted by a different department in the library to come in for programming. I know Box has plans to speak with our teens and our teen advisory board of the teen department about cool careers as a professional artist. So it's exciting that with each residency that we do, it feels like the community continues to grow, and the network expands. So it's sort of iterative in that way. If you're interested in applying for this residency, the applications are open now through November 3rd, and I'm going to stop my screen share and drop into the chat the application information. But if you have questions for us, we'd love to hear from you. There's one in the chat already from Shai. They ask, what else, other interaction do the residency arts get involved in community? Do you encourage artists to create art with participants collaboratively through the residency? Jeff, Jeanette, do you want to speak to that at all?
As far as collaborative art, during my residency, we created many projects that were left in the studio space, and people either said, here, you can keep this and put it into the display of art. I think our opening activity was to create mandalas, and we had the whole studio space was filled with the creations that people left behind to be a part of the installation. That happened several times with activities that we did with classes that I taught during the residency. So we didn't create one piece of art which everybody contributed to, but we created installation of art that people contributed to. So yes, I say go for it.
I'll add to that we build in sort of different ways that patrons can interact with the artists. They can sign up for formal workshops where they, we know that how many seats are available, and we can prepare the amount of supplies that they need to participate in a woodworking or painting or costume design workshop. We also included in, this sort of, we have a 69-hour commitment or throughout the course of the entire residency, and they can break that up over 3 or 4 months, however they choose. Encourage the artists to build an open studio time where they're just in their studio working on something and people can casually interact with them, or come in and trouble. There have been several residents who've created troubleshooting times out of those residencies. So if you signed up for a workshop and you've half finished your project, come back during an open studio and continue to work alongside the artist, or bring in another project that you've been inspired to create and get some troubleshooting help. That's a lot of what our current maker in residence is doing with folks, because he's working a lot in our AV studio on music recording and AV recording. And so he's helping people troubleshoot their projects and their tech issues. Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
Not much. I mean, I was doing some lutherie during that time, and I know that Miles and I built a ukulele together. And I don't know if that was collaboration so much as the only way to teach is to begin the process and have somebody else jump in with you. But we did a little of that. I think if I were to go back and do it again, that's something I would investigate, were ways we could do that, more collaborative projects. And with printmaking, we certainly could.
Well, you did the toboggans too, right?
Yeah, the toboggans was a cool collaborative project.
We had six youth that were really, really involved with that, but we got many, many, many other people's hands on it.
Yeah, and I think that was interesting too, because there were different there are multimodal opportunities for people to participate. They could participate as an observer, they could participate as someone who's really hands-on, they could just do one section of the project and walk away, or they could be there from the beginning to the end to see it come to fruition. And all of those were valid and good ways to participate in this.
It was a great project.
Julie has a question. She says, oh, that's really cool. She's saying that they're starting a residency program at the Carnegie Center. And I believe she's in Southern Indiana. Does the stipend fluctuate depending on the available budget, or is it the same amount each year? The stipend currently is $3,000 for 69 hours of work, dedicated programmatic work. But like Jeanette and Jeff said, they ended up being in the studio much more than that, especially because they moved their home studio into the space. But not all of the hours that they were in the space were their doors open to patrons. It was sometimes they were just working independently. And we've been able to increase that from an initial stipend. So originally the stipend was $2,500, and then we were able to increase it to $3,000 based on based on the feedback that we've gotten from our patrons and from our residents about the success of the program. We were able to make the case that our friends should fund a little bit more money. And we hope that as this program continues to grow, that the friends will continue to fund it at a level that increases as cost of living increases. And so that's sort of something that we look at to determine when those increases need to happen. We're in a unique situation because the Friends of the Library is a granting organization that specifically raises money to give to library programs. So we're lucky that they're supportive of this program. One thing that we do is have a member of the Friends of the Library have a regular seat on our jury so that they're always participating in the selection process of the artist. Oh, great, yeah, so you have a friends group too then. So they might be a great place to start with when you're looking for funding support. And we have seen, it's fluctuated. I would say probably in 2019 for the 2020 year, we had the most applications that we had. In 2020 for the 2021 year, it was a little different because it was COVID. So it was, we only had the residency since 2018 going. So I think we've only done maybe 6 or 7 residents so far. And it's been difficult to attract artists to a public setting because, like, many people don't want to leave their homes right now because of the pandemic. I would say in our best year, we probably got 24 to 30 applicants, and we narrowed the field down to about half that we juried with our juried artists, with our jury of community members and partner organizations and the Friends of the Library and other members of our department. So it's really depending, and we try and push it out as much as possible to like niche networks. So we have the fortune to be able to share it with the Arts Council of Indianapolis, and if there's any Arts Council areas in Southern Indiana that I'm not aware of, that would be great. One thing that we're interested in pursuing that I'm trying to figure out for myself right now is how we might be able to attract more non-visual artists, because we've had so many visual artists. To get a dance artist or a performance artist or a spoken word poet to participate as a resident would be really, really cool, because that would lend to greater diversity of the types of mediums that we're exposing people to, which is one of our big goals. But we've only had one fiber artist so far, so that's another thing we can look for. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
I have more questions, but I'll wait. Give somebody else a chance.
And Julie, I'd be happy to connect with you after this too, and just be a resource to you as you develop your program.
Thank you. Yeah, I might come. Maybe I could organize to come up and visit you.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's such a great space, and the space that is dedicated for the resident is fabulous. I mean, the light and the fishbowl aspect where you can have the door closed but people can still see in was really cool.
I was going to say, just ask away, Julie. You never know, you might have a question someone else has on their mind, or something might come up that will be helpful to others, and we've got 15 minutes left, so.
But don't worry, we don't have to fill those if people are run dry, right? This is either way.
Okay. Well, I was wondering about your process of deciding to make it an application. So we actually did have our first resident last year, but we were really just flying by the seat of our pants, and it was very experimental. And we sought that person out specifically. And this year I was thinking about seeking somebody else out, or possibly trying a nomination system. But how did you go about, as you were creating this residency program, figuring out the best way for you to find the artists? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jeff did not apply for the residency. He was sort of a similar situation, just a ringer that we knew. He was a former IPS teacher who was willing to move his entire studio into our space, and just came to us really highly recommended from members of the community that we had worked with to develop the space. And so we just knew that, he was a ringer, and we were going to be able to bring him in and have some success. And that also he was willing to build the program with us and kind of let us fail a little bit on him, and help us learn what we didn't know, and give us that feedback. So he kind of came in knowing, like, you're gonna be telling us what we need to know about this and helping us figure it out for the next people. And then after that, we opened it up to application process because we didn't know who was out there. And we wanted the opportunity to be able to meet artists through the application process. And one thing that we found that's been really useful for us is that through the application process, you know, we hire teaching artists every month as well. So, you know, in addition to having a resident artist for 3 or 4 months twice a year, every month we're hiring a different teaching artist to do a one-off workshop for us. You know, so we pay someone to come in for 2 Saturdays and teach the exact same workshop that month on 2 different Saturdays, or 2, you know, however it works out with their schedule. And from the application process, we're now identifying those teaching artists. So many of the residents that we're selecting started by applying to the residency program and not getting it, and then working with us as a teaching artist, and then building a relationship with us and reapplying to the program, and then getting it on their second try. And that has been a great way for us to know that we have this sort of pool of teaching artists that are gives us opportunity to get to know them, to get to learn their working style, for them to get to learn our community, and then, you know, to have had the opportunity to build that relationship with them prior to, you know, them starting residency with us has been really great. And that's been the case for, you know, for Box and for Kay and for David Arnold, who was our limestone carver. They are all started with us as teaching artists prior to being a resident artist with us.
Caitlin, can I ask you, the applicants come primarily from a close geographical radius?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah,
what you find?
You know, it sort of has to come from Indy or the donut counties, because you sort of need to live in driving distance. You know, it depends on how long you're willing to commute, but you have to live within driving distance. Which I think, Julie, that presents, you know, aren't you just over the river from Louisville? So there's probably a wealth of artists that wouldn't mind crossing interstate lines
Well,
for a
that's
good
true.
residency experience.
That is true. However, we are Indiana taxpayer funded.
Yeah.
So
They would prefer to hire an Indiana
New
artist.
Albany, yeah. So they do prefer that. And New Albany Louisville is really close to us, but New Albany is actually quite far from any other large city. So I know you guys are so close to Indianapolis, you probably do get a lot of applications, but our community is smaller. So I would love to have a living space to offer.
Mhm.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's what I was just going to say, because that's you know, that's one area that Ignite doesn't have to really touch on. But I was thinking if it could be a residency with living accommodations or a host family or something like that, you could then open it up to the state of Indiana rather than just your local area.
Yeah,
I'd apply.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's the dream.
Sounds like a field trip to me for Julie. I think there's a field trip here.
Definitely. I'm going to reach out to Caitlin.
Yeah,
sure.
I put my email in the chat for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think we're probably about done, don't you? Thank you. Yes, thank you. You've been lovely. You've just been lovely, and you know, it's late in the day on day 2, so everybody gets a little bit tired. What fun stuff you guys are doing. I said before we got started, when it was just insiders, you know, how excited I am for the public libraries that have been part of this year's event, talking about different kinds of programming and what I'm seeing from maker spaces and residencies in various parts of Indiana and elsewhere. It's lovely. It just, you know, warms the cockles of my heart.
If I could just
Yes,
everyone
please.
in this, if you feel like you know someone who might be a good fit for our residency and want to share the application guidelines with them, we would really appreciate it. I put those in the chat.
So, for everybody who's watching, the recording of this will be up in a couple of weeks. And you've got some contacts in the chat, and we wish you all the best. And thank you, and have fun for the rest of today and tomorrow's keynote. Thank you, guys.
Everyone.
Thank you.
you.